Hello, good afternoon. Happy Imbolc. Happy the 1st of February. This is Angela Ward. I'm keeping the microphone closer to myself today because I want to know if y'all can hear me better, even though I don't love it. But anyway, hello. I'm so glad you're here. As you come on, please say hello. Let me know you're watching. Leave me some comments or some emojis. That's always so nice. And if you're watching the replay, please put replay in the comments. So, hey, I have a question for you. Stress, is it good or is it bad? I would say that most of us living in our culture these days have been taught that stress is bad for us, that it's something to really avoid, that it's a difficult place to be. But what is it really? And how might it be good for us to befriend our stress? Hello, Ellie. Glad to see you here. So let's first define what stress is. Basically, it's scientifically it is an organism's total response to environmental demands or pressure. So it's a normal physiologic response that we are supposed to have in order to make things, to change things that are happening in our environment, to respond to them. The problem that we've gotten into is we've really identified stress as all bad or all one thing, and with good reason. So let's talk about bad stress first. So bad stress, it is results in us feeling overwhelmed, feeling exhausted, fatigued, and eventually like sick. There is this arc. I wish I could find it and share it with you. There's an arc. I'll just describe it. So there's something called the human function curve. And I can't really share it on my screen, or I would be happy to. So there's a level of arousal stress that runs across the horizontal axis. And as we start having stress in our lives, there's a little bit of this healthy tension that happens, which is considered the eustress or good stress. Usually that amount of arousal stress is just enough, right, to get us up and functioning in our day. However, there's a sweet spot, the growth edge of stress, where we're getting to the place where we're like not able to reach the cookie jar on the shelf, but not having it so out of reach that we can't grasp it, but rather having it just at the tiptoe of our reach that we have to like really extend or reach a little bit further. I hope that makes sense. That is the sweet spot of eustress, of good stress. However, if we continue along the stress pathway, we get to the next phase, which is fatigue. All of us have experienced this. After fatigue, then it starts going downhill. If you're not relieving the stress, we start moving into distress, bad stress, right? That's moving us into a place of exhaustion, eventually to ill health, and then finally into breakdown. We don't want that part. So that's kind of the difference between the two parts of stress. Some of you may have experienced the positive aspects of stress. Let's say if you're someone that's ever worked out, for example, or if you've ever played an instrument, something like that, or created something. There's this leading edge of pressure, this environmental pressure we're putting on ourselves to move more, strengthen muscles, create something. Maybe there's another type of stress. Maybe you're studying for a test and you know that there's this pinnacle of relief that's coming, but you can put the pressure on without it crossing into fatigue. And that is actually a really resilient and adaptive, beautiful way to engage with stress. One of the key things that we identify in that bad stress place Thank you, Ellie. I really like this one. Having to stay in the zone of tolerance. Yeah, for sure. Hopefully it's a little more tolerable, like you're even going a little more to the edge of that a bit. So there's a saying that bad stress in humans results from interactions between persons and their environment that are perceived as straining or exceeding their adaptive capacities and threatening their well-being. So that's when we're crossing into that eustress place. This is crucial, though, is this element of perception of what's happening in the stressful place. Are we perceiving what's happening as a negative situation, or are we perceiving it as something that's beneficial for our growth? Many of my clients that I've worked with, and just I think even in some of these talks, as I've described how we can really identify this within the body. So if you imagine that you're feeling your heart pounding and you're feeling that you're taking maybe some really big breaths, trying to think of what other physical sensations, maybe a little bit of clenching. Many people would identify that as an anxiety feeling, like your body feels like it's anxious. But the reality is you're just having an embodied experience, which may either be anxiety, you're labeling it as anxiety, or you can label it as excitement. This is all around perception. That feeling of excitement and of anxiety in the body are the same biological feeling that we have. So it's important to really understand how you're perceiving what is happening in your body. So this is another reason it's crucial to befriend that stress experience so you can get curious about it and understand if what's happening is what you're identifying it as. Also, by being able to feel the embodied experience of stress, it helps us define that edge between the eustress, that good zone of tolerance, and when you're starting to cross into the fatigue or when you're just kind of plummeting down the other side. Now, let's try to avoid the plummeting down the other side. But let's find that growth edge. Let's find that leading edge where we can kind of push into that stress for growth, tolerating discomfort for growth, being able to move into that space so we can build and expand. So many of us already understand that long-term chronic stress leads to a number of health-related issues. Some of them are poor sleep, poor diet, terrible digestion. It can lead to chronic long-term issues. Like, for example, I was working in a situation that was high stress for a long time, and I ended up burning out my adrenal glands and just crashed, like had a pretty intense illness that it took a long time to heal from. So it can have ultimate physiological illness and outcomes. Some of the things that put us at risk for experiencing stress are really those situations where we feel out of control. They can be related to personal issues, interpersonal issues, more of community or societal variables, such as, let's say you've injured yourself and you need to stay with your family member that maybe you don't get along so great with. You've kind of lost some control of your autonomy. That can cause a lot of stress for people's lives. Or, for example, in COVID times, people have lost some of that social support network that we've been able to use before and connect with that can help us relieve some stress. What are some other things? I think also that sense of feeling helpless or hopeless or being in a place of extreme fear or anger can really frazzle that stress level. Also, a level of deep distrust can really, really exacerbate that stress response. So I've wanted to talk a little bit more about our nervous systems. And if Amelia ends up watching this, she's going to laugh because we talked about the same thing in her class this weekend. It was on my radar to talk about today. If you'll recall, a few weeks back, I was talking about the different types of nervous system. Well, different types of autonomic nervous system responses and their hierarchical way of being. So we have this old paradigm of sympathetic fight or flight, parasympathetic rest and digest nervous system, which we are discovering is not actually as accurate as we had thought. It's not this on off switch. It's actually layers of evolutionary development about our responses to stress. So parasympathetic is the sympathetic is the older. Wait, I got to get my my book out here so I make sure I'm not blowing smoke up your butt. Unless you want me to. Okay. Yeah, parasympathetic is the oldest branch. And with its normal functioning, the parasympathetic nervous system has our baseline metabolism. It's the one that's responsible for rest, rebuild, meditative states, and that's the arousal portion of sex as well as sleep. A normal function of the next evolutionary level is the sympathetic nervous system. That is, in its normal operating function, is what we need for mobilization, daytime alertness, recreational excitement, initiative, muscular activity, and for the climax of sex. So that is the sympathetic response when it's in a healthy, normal function. And of course, the most evolved current level of our nervous system is the social nervous system. This is the one in its normal function is responsible for love, communication and language, social organization, sex, which is the flirting and afterglow pieces, vocalization, a word I can't read, prosody? Reciprocal play is the social piece, as well as contact and interaction. So when those nervous systems are all operating at their most functional, the stress, the eustress that comes from that is actually really healthy and in balance of our wholeness and well-being. However, they can have this is probably not the best word, but they have a stress response. So there's normal function and then there's a distress response. Let's call it that. I think that fits better. So the parasympathetic nervous system, when it is in a distressed response, is what causes the freeze action or immobility. It causes dissociation, depression, can cause catatonia, sleep disorders, and that parasympathetic shock, which is not a good place to be. The sympathetic nervous system de-stress response is the alarm and anxiety portion. It's when we orient, like if you hear a loud noise and you're like, that's your sympathetic nervous system in arousal in the way it's supposed to operate. It also, the distress response is that fight or flight. Maybe I want to change the word. I don't think it's distress. Maybe it is distress because like you're in distress if there's a bear coming after you, right? Yeah. It also is the discharge energy. The sympathetic nervous system is when it's in that stress place is discharging, shaking, bouncing, whatever. And it also can start settling into rest before it trips into that dissociated freeze place. Like, I don't know if any of you have ever been in a situation that's really stressful and you get extremely fatigued all of a sudden. I've had that experience. It's super weird where you're like, I'm going to go to bed now. It doesn't seem normal, but apparently that's related to the sympathetic nervous system response. And the social nervous system in a distress response is in crisis contact and communication. So checking on one another. It's the first aid response, the tend and befriend space. It is empathy, comfort, touch, emergency teamwork, and group psychology. So when I talk about that, I hope it helps you understand that this is not like stress is not the enemy. It's not an enemy that should be avoided. It's a really beautiful built-in part of our physiology. But where the problem is when we get stuck and we don't know how to titrate between the two, that growth edge and then crossing over into fatigue and all of that and burning out your cortisol and all of those things. So this week, my challenge for you is to slow down, first of all, And notice when you're starting to feel that trigger or when you're starting to feel stress. The first part is, of course, just identifying what stress feels like in your body. Many of us, stress comes in tension, which makes sense, right? Because we're like activating. So maybe notice the holding, or if there's a freezing of your jaw or your breath, and take a moment to check. Am I experiencing stress right now? And it's just an inquiry, yes or no. Is this stressful? And it could be real. Like you could be really thinking through a thing that's causing you some stress to have to think through the process. Or maybe you're doing something, lifting weights, or I don't know, whatever you're doing. I'm learning how to pole dance. So my arms are getting stressed out to build muscle, right? And get super strong. But when you're feeling the stress, the next step is going to be to make a choice about it. Perceive it. So you're like, okay, I'm feeling this. Normally, I identify this feeling as anxiety, or normally I identify this feeling as what? So curiosity, be curious about the feeling that you're having. And then I'd like you to check with yourself and see where you might be on that curve. Are you in a growth edge in a really good place that's hard, that's kind of pushing for you, that almost reaching the cookie jar on the top shelf? Or are you getting to a place where you're starting to cross the hump into fatigue? I'm just asking for awareness in this stress response. Some things you can do with that, if you'd like, is if you are experiencing stress and it's starting to cross over into the fatigue line, I would like you to take the most pristine and beautiful care of yourself and make a choice. Do we keep pushing here? What do I need to do to soothe and rest for a moment? So if we're thinking of that higher social order, that social distress response is talking about it's talking about that empathy, comfort, and touch. So how might you bring in some of that de-stressing technique of comfort and touch? I've often suggested havening. Ellie even made me a cute little image of me doing this to myself all the time. You know, whatever it might take to just calm your animal body down. Or what other comfort might you need to allow yourself to settle? That's really good to think about. But if you're moving into a place of that lower order, and I don't mean lower order as in it's not as good, but just that it's an older evolutionary level. If you're moving into that sympathetic response of anger or fear, let's do some next level stuff to soothe and care for that place. If you find yourself fully dissociated in the parasympathetic de-stressed response or totally shut down, reach out to somebody. Hey, I know that's super hard, but I'm here for you. Nicole's around. She's happy to connect with you. Put some comments in the groups. We can try to support each other through this. Remember, always check back into your breath and ask, what else could this be? But yeah, are there any questions about any of that? I know I just shared a whole bunch of stuff. I guess the reason I think this is important is because befriending our stress helps us build resilience. I'm not sure that I explained that at the beginning. If we never get to know our stress, we can only handle like this little tiny stress, right? Like we can only go this far and then it's like, Wah! So as we learn to kind of titrate and work the edges of our stress, we get to a place where we can have a little more openness. We can lean into the stress a little bit more, but then know how to come back from it and really take care of ourselves in that coming back from that stress place. And when we build in resilience, we just have so much more power and capacity to function in a stressful world and to help care for one another, right? So those are my thoughts for today. Yeah, let me know what it's like for you to contemplate the stress and what seems to be coming through in this process. Also, if you wanted to know what book I was looking at, this is John Chitty's Dancing with Yin and Yang. Ancient Wisdom, Modern Psychotherapy, and Randolph Stone's Polarity Therapy. It's really good. I think I talked about this before, but I met John Chitty came to me through birth work and talking about perinatal and prenatal nervous system responses. And this book is really fascinating about how to work with that energy in adults as well. So it also has some information about Stephen Porges's polyvagal theory, which is also speaking to this if you want to nerd out and go down that path and look at more information around there. So that's what I got for you. Does anybody want a card today? Does anybody want a card? First person that posts is going to get a card. I'm waiting. There's a delay. Oh, who's here? Who's here? Who says here? It only says Facebook user. I don't know who you are. You got to give StreamYard permission to show me your stuff, you guys, if you happen to watch this again. Okay, Facebook user here. Thank you. Who is that? Who are you? Put your name in the comments so I know who you are. Oh gosh, I've just had a bunch of people say stuff. Okay, I don't know who you are, so we'll start. Getting the animal. Felicia! Oh, it says Felici. Feliz Navidad. I'm getting it, girl. I see you. Okay. I'm going to shuffle until I see you put your name in there one more time, and then I'm going to draw the card because I got to be able to stop. Ooh, thank you, Shelly. Felicia, you got to give StreamYard permission so I can see it's you. Bank, 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 bank. I am shuffling. What is Felicia's message for today? I guess I'm going to just pick one because I haven't seen anything. I'm going to pick this card. I hope it's the right one. I'm sure it will be. Ooh. Look at this. Look what you got. You got Parrot Spirit. Isn't that a beautiful card? It says, watch your words. And it came upright. So can I hold it somehow so I can still talk in the mic and you guys can see it? Okay. Let's read about Parrot Spirit. Parrots are amazing. And I think it's really messed up that people keep them in cages in their house. They're supposed to be wild and free. Okay. Okay. Here we go. Watching our words. Maybe. What are you saying to yourself, Felicia? What message are you repeating? Is it something that makes you feel good about yourself and reminds you of your strengths and potentials? Parrots mimic the sounds around them. And when Parrot Spirit appears, it is time to be more mindful of your self-talk and its qualities. What do you say to others? Are you repeating what you truly believe? Remembering to speak with light and love can become a habit. Be generous with compliments and thanks, affirming all that is good so your loving, healing words will be heard throughout the jungle, cutting through the noise and inspiring others. Listen for the words that remind you of all the strength, abundance, and joy in your life and in the world around you, and then repeat them, affirming what is real, true, and nurturing to the soul. The universe will reflect back to you the story that you tell. Words matter. So choose ones that lift you up and inspire others to remember that beauty surrounds us all. I feel like this card is appropriate for everybody on this call today. So thank you for calling this one out, Felicia. I think Parrot Spirit is beautiful. Watch what's going on in here, my friends. All right, just a couple more announcements. If you haven't been over to our Mighty Network yet, please come over there. That's a much more contained, safe, yummy place on the interwebs. I'd love to have you all over there. And of course, tonight is our first night of the next Full Spectrum Vitality Collective. We are meeting to begin the next round. If you have yet to sign up, please reach out to me and I'll make sure that you can get enrolled and get there. It's a bit of a different format than last time, but it's going to be rad. And we have awesome people in there, and it would be so great to have you join us. So those are my 2 things. And please keep me posted about how you're experiencing, dealing, learning about stress. All right. Love to you all. Have a great day.